And now the big question for Democratic leaders is whether the convention is boosting Vice President Harris's poll numbers. Just before the convention, Harris led Trump by 4 points among registered voters in an ABC Washington Post poll. She also topped Trump in 4 out of 7 swing states. So for more on that, let's bring in host of the 538 Politics podcast, Galen Druke. Galen, Harris has been improving in the polls since President Biden dropped out of the race. Do you expect the DNC to move that needle further?
It wouldn't surprise me, Diane, and that's for 2 reasons. One, we oftentimes see a convention bounce for the nominee. But on top of that, it looks like perceptions of Harris are relatively malleable. And to make that point, I think we should look at her favorability rating, which before she became the nominee was net -16. A lot more Americans having a negative view of her than a positive view. Over the past month, that has improved to where she's practically pulled even with the American public. And in an environment where views are relatively set in amongst Americans in this polarized, partisan environment, that kind of swift movement is very dramatic and suggests that views of Harris were not really dug in all that deep. We've also seen this in polling, that voters say that 75% of American voters say they have made up their minds about Donald Trump and nothing could change that, whereas only 50% of Americans say that about Harris.
Now, the Obamas were the big draw last night, and the crowd went wild for both of them. But how much of a draw do they, or how much sway, I should say, do they actually have with the American people?
That's a good question. The Obamas are unique in American politics in that they are popular with the majority of Americans in this environment where politics have turned negative and people have sort of soured on politicians. A clear majority of Americans, according to polling, have a favorable view of both Barack and Michelle Obama. So when they speak, folks are inclined to listen, also because these are not the kind of people that you regularly see on cable news, like lots of other politicians. They sort of keep their fire for moments like this. And the message that they delivered, a lot of it was a critique of Trump. But when Barack Obama took the stage, he also made the argument for Democrats to pitch a bigger tent. You know, since his time in the Oval Office, Democrats have arguably become a more ideological party on all kinds of different areas, and you can point to things like cancel culture or whatnot. And what he was saying to Democratic voters and the country more broadly is that perhaps the party needs fewer litmus tests, that you don't have to agree on everything in order to back the nominee. And for all of the Americans watching this is the Democrats' opportunity to sort of make their pitch to a really large audience, one of the largest audience of the entire election cycle. You really do want to pitch to the median voter and not just the base.
Now, we're going to hear from Governor Tim Walz tonight. What do Americans make of him so far, and how important is his address tonight, this sort of first impression to the nation?
Yeah, I mean, so far, first impressions are not bad. We've been talking about the favorability ratings of Harris and the Obamas. Right now, Walz has a net positive favorability rating of 5 percentage points with the American public. Just to compare that, for example, to J.D. Vance's favorability rating, he's net -10, so he's underwater with the American public. Now, what we've seen from the narrative about Walz so far is he's trying to pitch himself as the American heartland everyman, social studies teacher, vet, football coach. But Republicans are trying to critique the narrative he's told and find inconsistencies in that narrative. I think he is going to try to double down on the American heartland everyman message and really make his pitch to voters across the upper Midwest, where he will be speaking tonight.
All right, ABC's Galen Druke, thank you.
Thank you.
And be sure to check out our friends at 538 for the latest election data and analysis all throughout the day, night, and in the coming days and weeks. That's at their website, 538.com, or by just scanning that QR code below.